Of course. So just one more time for everybody here. Thank you for showing up. While he's talking, just stay muted. If you have a question, just use the hand raising emoji. Somebody will get to you. Steve, we thank you for joining us, and you can take it away now.
Great. Well, it's a pleasure to be with you all. What Chris had said might be helpful for me to just kind of talk about my journey and how I got to my current position. Since I'm old, it will take a while for me to take you through the whole journey. I think it's been quite a ride. I grew up, and I'll do this chronologically just because it's easier. I grew up in Vermont, in Burlington. I went to the University of Vermont undergrad and I went straight through, got my MBA from Boston College, which was a ton of fun. I've got a junior in college, my daughter Maddie, who goes to Boston College as well, and her twin brother goes to SMU. For me, that first job getting out was really important. It was really hard. The hundreds of rejection letters I got from different places that I had applied to work at was a humbling experience, but I think an important one. I ended up getting a job in New York City at a company called American Home Products, which then was primarily and still is primarily a pharmaceutical company. I worked for a foods division that they had at the time, and I was ultimately the brand manager on the Chef Boyardee brand, which was interesting. I had a family friend. I wanted to get into sports my whole life. At that point, which was pretty short. I didn't know what that meant. There's sports management and sports marketing at the time. Back when I graduated from business school, which was 1987, it was a fledgling industry. So he said, my advice to you is to go work for a big company in a functional area of marketing. And in 3, 4, or 5 years, when you apply for these positions in the sports industry, you'll have a transferable skill that they will want, which is actually, it was pretty prophetic. So I worked at American Home. I ultimately ended up being a brand manager there on the Chef Boyardee brand, which is, at the time was $1 billion brand. Don't eat that food. I've seen how it's been made. It's really not what you want to do. And then I got on with a beer company called the Guinness Import Company. I was a brand manager on the Bass Ale brand. You can drink Bass Ale. It's much better than the Chef Boyardee. I was there for a brief time, and then I started my journey in sports. So I got a job at the NFL. I worked there for 13 and a half. I sound like an 8-year-old who goes in half years, but it was NFL is a great place to work. Probably a couple of Seahawks fans on this call. It was, it's a big brand. You don't need to tell people what the NFL is. It's very different than what I do now. Not just because I'm the president of the company, but just kind of the approach. So at the NFL, it's things move very slowly. They're very methodical about what they do. They don't have to take chances because they're the number one sport in the country. And so I worked there, as I said, for over 13 years. My last 7, I ran the partnership group. I was the VP of partnerships, working with major brands, Coke and then Pepsi, Visa, Chevy, Cadillac, all big brands. And I ran both the sales group as well as the partnership group. And then I went to work for a year for Casey Wasserman at Wasserman. And then my time with NASCAR started in 2005. So I started running our New York office, which was primarily very similar to what I did at the NFL. Within 4 months, for some odd reason, they promoted me to the chief marketing officer, and they moved me to Daytona Beach, Florida. And so I was the CMO there for about, so I'm going to get this wrong, maybe 12 or 13 years. And then I was the chief operating officer, and I'm now the president of a very different organization than when I joined. 2 years ago, almost to the day, we merged with our sister company, which was a public company called International Speedway Corp, and they own 12 racetracks. So in our portfolio, we actually owned 15 racetracks now. So I work at what is called the sanctioning body, at which people refer to as NASCAR, but we also own all these tracks too. So we are not fully vertical, but it's a portion of what we do is. We are very different than stick and ball sports like the NFL. The NFL owns themselves. So if you buy a franchise and you spend 2 billion, 3 billion, 4, whatever the number is, you have 1/32 of a vote to determine what direction the league should go in. We don't have that. Ours is a far different thing. So we run the sport, but we have others that are important stakeholders in it. So our teams are independent from us completely. They do not have an ownership stake within NASCAR. They just own their teams. They contract with the drivers. There are tracks that we don't own that we also race at. They're another important stakeholder. Our two broadcast partners, Fox and NBC, are incredibly important stakeholders in our sport. And ultimately, it all comes down to the fans. And we're in a situation right now where we had the good fortune of expanding our sport. So the last 3 years, we actually growing. I would say that the most important thing for us really have been last year, 2020. So as a sport, we are stronger in a post-pandemic or in the pandemic than we were pre-pandemic. So in 2019, our ratings were up, our ticket sales were up, but we were just doing a better job of mining the existing fans we had, which were, older, white, and male. And so we were growing in, with Hispanics and making some inroads, but being the first sport back to competing last year, which we were, the first sport back to competing in front of fans. And most importantly, the stance that we took as a sport to lend our voice towards, after the George Floyd death, the death of George Floyd, social justice was important. And we knew we needed to do better as a sport, which surprised a lot of people because I think people consider NASCAR wrongly to be a quote racist sport. We are not. We are a community, a family, a lot of good people who are in this sport. And that was important for us to say that we needed to do better, that we needed to educate ourselves to try to bridge the racial divide that exists in this country. That was important for us. And then a week later, we banned the Confederate flag. And then less than a week after that, we had an incident in Talladega, and Bubba Wallace, a noose was found in his garage. It brought the FBI in, and ended up, could have been any other driver, but it happened to be him that was in that garage stall. It had been there since the previous September when we had raced there. And then the show of support that the entire industry had rallying around Bubba on that next day, on that Monday. And then fast forward until a week ago Monday, and Bubba won his first NASCAR Cup Series race at Talladega, his home state and the site of one of the most iconic visual things that happened in our sport. And so that brings us up to today. And I'm happy to answer any and all questions that you have.
So if you have a question, use the hand raising emoji. I'll get it started. I actually got to work one time during the Pocono Series race. And one thing that I noticed that really the biggest thing that stood out to me is the fan interaction with racers. That it's like unlike any other sport I've really ever seen. A lot of fans can kind of go right in between the trailers to the garages and stuff. So is that something you really stress with racers? Like, hey, make yourself available so you can have this fan interaction with a lot of people?
Yeah, I think the good thing for our drivers, they understand the importance of access to fans, or fans having access to them. Very much the same on the corporate community. And, literally, if you have access, right, and the grid where we have the cars before to start your engines command, you can go up and, say to Bubba Wallace, "Hey, good luck, man." And he'd be like, "Oh, hey, thanks." It's just a very different thing. So having fans on the playing field is unique. Even having them on pit road, right, or on a pit box, it's just a very sensory experience. When you go to a NASCAR race, it's loud. Every sense you have is engaged when you're at NASCAR, and it's a cool thing. But access is a really, really important thing for us, and so our drivers are. They sign a ton of autographs. They take a lot of pictures. It's just it's a good thing. And then I think social media has played a big part of that as well. Our guys are not quite as popular on social media as like a little LeBron would be, but those that do interact with them are very engaged, and our drivers are as well.
Thank you. Thomas, your hand was up. You can go next.
Hi, Steve. Thank you for joining us. I have a question about, do you guys have any, or do you work with any other sports that are emerging or growing within America, or even other sports within racing to kind of maybe work together to share fans in a way, or introduce your sport to a different fan base in a different sport? Or is there any interaction there you have with the other sports companies?
Yeah. So the answer to that is yes, in one word. It takes different forms. So we are right now working with the NBA to try to figure out how we're going to partner with them. I would say before our stance, kind of banning the flag and the Confederate flag and the stance on social justice, that Adam Silver would not be interested in doing that. But we've worked with pro bowling. We've worked done a little bit with the NFL. We're doing a lot right now with NFL players. Alvin Kamara. I just finished a Sports Business Journal World Congress interview with Brandon Marshall. Did a podcast with him 2 weeks ago on his I Am Athlete podcast with Fred Taylor. So yeah, there are absolutely cross-pollination opportunities for us as well as for others. And it's a fairly self-serving thing, but everyone wins, right? And there are also best practices that we can get from each other. So when we were the first sport back, I talked to Jay Monahan regularly at the PGA Tour to try to see if there are things that they could do. I used to work with Don Garber, who's the commissioner of Major League Soccer. I worked for Roger Goodell, who obviously is the current commissioner. It's just, it's a small fraternity of people, men and women who once you're in the sports industry, it very much is just a huge community, and the opportunity to grow it is something that's always there.
Ryan, go ahead.
Thank you.
Yes. So again, thank you. As Thomas said, I was just wondering, with your experiences both inside and outside of sports, what has been the biggest difference that you've noticed in both those industries?
I think the sports industry it has evolved significantly. I would say outside of sports, it's just globalization, right? Because it's not enough just to be good domestically. You have to be good, worldwide. And I know that rubs some people the wrong way, and I understand why. Those that are not fans of big business, I totally get it. The sports industry continues to change. And one of the things that I've been struck by is this idea of what role athletes or sports properties should play in social justice. And that was on full display last year. I think if you ask Adam, he probably would say that they went too far, and that it alienated a significant number of either current fans or fans they had and potential fans. But that's a very delicate balance. I think we struck the right chord. it surprised people, but we were kind of authentic to who we are. And also, I think the tenor of where things were in the country in June of 2020, for us, the most important thing is, okay, you had this stance, you made a statement. What are you going to do to sustain that? Because we are true to the where we're going from a diversity, equity, inclusion standpoint. You know, every single one of you on this call, you know, if it feels like it's not authentic, if it feels like it's not true, then you guys don't participate as a group. And I know that's a gross generalization, but it's a fact. You know, you guys are, you know, you'll sniff out racism, you'll sniff out injustice. And I think it's a fantastic thing of your generation. And I applaud it. If we're going to grow as a sport, just like any other brand, you have got to infuse your brand with new customers, right? And for us, that means fans. And the best place to do that, and in what we are seeing, certainly over the last 16 months, is a younger and more diverse fan base that is coming to NASCAR to sample us. People who frankly just never would have considered us, you know, in their consideration set before, now are looking at it and saying, okay, I'm going to give this a shot, which is all we can ask for. We have a great sport. It's fun. It's different than what people think it is. There's strategy. There's, you know, good guys and bad guys, and it's just it's a very cool thing. And diversifying our driver base, our crew base. You know, so Bubba Wallace is Black. Danny Suarez is from Mexico. Two incredibly talented stars in our series, but we've got some phenomenal up and coming young women to the series as well, and to NASCAR racing. And yeah, the face of the fan base, the face of the drivers, the face of the owner. So we have a new owner. Michael Jordan is an owner. He actually is the owner of Bubba Wallace's car. Pitbull is an owner of Danny Suarez's car. We never would have had Pitbull or Michael Jordan if we hadn't taken the stance we took last June. I know there's a long-winded answer to your question.
Thank you.
Alejandro, go ahead.
Hey, Steve, just wanted to say thank you again for taking the time to talk to us.
My pleasure.
I was wondering if you could tell us a little about maybe some of your favorite parts of what you do in your current position as a president. And then on the other side, maybe talk about some of the less fun, less enjoyable aspects of your position.
So I would say I love NASCAR racing. So to me, going to the races is really fun. And that part, going to the racetrack, is just, you know, it's kind of like why I wanted to get into sports in the first place. I love sports. I had a love for NASCAR racing. I went to my first NASCAR race at a short track in Vermont with my dad. I was probably 5 or 6 years old. And so that part is fantastic. I would say that for me, the biggest, the thing that was most rewarding is what happened last June. I was so proud of our sport that we took steps necessary in order to open the aperture to a new fan base. And a lot of people said, hey, that was really courageous that you and your team did that. I thought it was just a great business decision that actually helped me sleep better at night, is what it was. So, and then on the other side, I think it's like anything, I have a very clear picture about what success looks like for our sport. Most of that success comes with making sure that all the stakeholders in the sport come together and understand the direction and vision that we need to take the sport. And then when you have opportunities to grow, and you outline a plan in order to do that, and then you have stakeholders that don't see the vision, don't care, whatever that might be, it's that part is frustrating. So last year, during the kind of the height of the pandemic and when we were shut down, our industry came together and solved for something very difficult. And now that we're doing quite well, actually, is when our industry starts to squabble and starts to figure out who should get what of the pie. And it's my responsibility to make sure that everyone just keeps staying focused and keeps executing against the plan.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Antoine, go ahead.
Thanks for being here today with us to share your story. I have a question. You have been talking multiple times about like extending NASCAR to a new audience in like June last year. Do you plan to maybe also extend it to other continents? Because I'm a French student here at Gonzaga, and I never heard about like NASCAR before coming to the US.
Yeah.
And it seems pretty big. So I was like curious if you plan to like extend it to the other continents.
Yeah, so the answer to that is yes. Our expansion into other countries or continents is, we've already started that. So we race in Canada, we race in Mexico, we actually race in Europe, including France, I believe. It's called the NASCAR Europe Series. And it's small, it's grassroots. All of our series in other countries are grassroots. And we believe if we're able to grow in country or continent, that both drivers coming over to race in our top series is important. So Danny Suarez, it's from Mexico. Danny Suarez raced in our Mexico series and was our Mexico series champion. That's a huge success story for us. And so Danny brings an entire fan base from Mexico with him when he comes, both those that are Mexican Americans in this country, as well as those in Mexico. So we're exploring opportunities in China, Brazil, the Middle East, India. And I think our style of racing, no disrespect meant to F1 or other forms of motorsport, ours is about side-by-side competitive, beating the crap out of each other kind of racing, which is exciting. And people around the globe are interested in doing that. If we're able to do that, then it will grow our fandom across the world. It is very important. We still have a lot of opportunity in this country, but the opportunity outside of our borders is significant. And so we're going to continue to expand into other countries and continents.
Thank you and good luck.
Thank you.
Lauren, go ahead. Lauren, we cannot hear you right now. Still can't hear you. Can hear you do that. Do you want to type your question?
You hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Yes. Okay. Sorry about that. Again, thank you for coming out. I was just wondering if you could take us through like what a typical day in your life looks like, and like what's your schedule like with like flexibility or variety.
Yeah, so the only thing that's constant in my day, Lauren, is really it's never the same day, which is exciting. There are different functions that I'm responsible for, so that the sport broadly is my responsibility. So I don't have a commissioner's title, but I kind of have that commissioner role. So sometimes it is about, like I had a significant amount of time yesterday that I did around 2022 business plans, and making sure that they were where they needed to be. They will then be followed by, within 2 weeks, by the 2022 budget. But sometimes there are different pieces of the job I actually had someone who was nice enough to track my meetings and what I was doing and kind of overlay that to what successful CEOs are supposed to do. Mine was fairly close, I guess. Some of it's kind of updating the rest of the board, including my 2 owners. There are only 5 board members. 2 of them are owners. I do a lot with our team owners. I do a lot with our drivers, just again, to try to bring people together so they understand what it is that we're trying to achieve. That on the weekends, I go to races. So sometimes I will work for 35, 40, 45 days in a row, which gets hard because I'll get to Monday and I'm tired. And I'll wake up and I'm like, what day is it? And then I kind of orient myself and figure out what it is we're going to do to grow the sport, which is, if there's an overarching goal that I have, is exactly that. It's my responsibility and those on my team to grow this sport. How you do that is the tricky part. Easy to say, hard to do. And so we found, some significant success over the last 3 years. If I'm completely honest, the decade before, we were on a fairly steady downward trend. Not massive declines, but declines. Didn't feel good. But over the last 3 years, we are on a steady ascent. And I think we're going to continue to grow for the next decade. I think with the pieces are in place that will allow us to do that. So I would say no set schedule. And a lot of times it just has to do with, making sure that whatever needs to happen at that particular time, whether it's strategic or it's tactical or it's building relationships, we'll do that. So we're in 2023, we're going to sit down with our television partners and talk about an extension. It's our responsibility as a sport to make sure that we do the things necessary in order to maximize the revenue that will come into this sport. And so there's a lot of focus that is around that. Focus around the race day experience or the race weekend experience to make sure that those that are sampling us for the first time have a great time at our facility. So there's much to do, lots of opportunity, but it feels good to be growing.
Awesome. Thank you. So we'll go Michael, Rayanne, and then we will wrap up. So Michael, go ahead.
Hey, Steve, just want to say thanks for coming out. And then my question was, how do you recruit other drivers to join NASCAR? Because you mentioned F1 and other motorsports. So that was my main question.
Yeah. So Michael, I think for us, we haven't really had a lot of Formula One drivers come to our series. For us, it's more of there's a feeder system that we have. That's kind of the path on how you get to NASCAR racing. A lot of it has to do with just opportunities and how people are going to get paid, right? And so we're a fairly lucrative place for people who want to drive race cars. There are lots of series in this country and elsewhere. For us, other than Formula One, the place where you're going to make money is in NASCAR. And so that helps us. And so we have feeder systems. We've got a program called Drive for Diversity, which provides opportunities to women and minorities to get seat time. Our cars are hard to drive. There's not a lot of downforce. It's kind of slippery. The back end just wants to break loose, which is something you really don't want to do at 200 miles per hour. But we have a brand new race car coming, our next gen car, which is a phenomenal looking car. But it should also race really, really well. And I think that drivers will be excited to strap into that car when they do that, when we go racing for the first time inside the LA Coliseum at an exhibition event in early February, the week before the Super Bowl, which is going to be really cool. So brand new car running in a stadium inside where we're going to pave inside that Coliseum is going to be really cool. Really excited about that.
Those sound very cool. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
All right, we'll go Rayanne and then we'll wrap it up. Ray, go ahead.
Awesome. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Perfect. I was in my car, I was a little worried. Steve, thank you so much for coming in. We all really appreciate it. Chris and I were very excited to get the opportunity to bring you in here. But just to wrap us up here, you've mentioned a couple of times about bringing female drivers into the sport. If you could talk a little bit about, you know, your aspirations for that continuing diversity going forward, and maybe even a little bit into the admin side. You know, NASCAR is known for being a stereotypically male-dominated sport, whether that be driver or admin, and just maybe touch a little bit on it, maybe some aspirations or what that's going to look like in the future for females in NASCAR.
Yeah, I would say the driver component's harder, right? Because you have to have, you know, girls and young women who want to do that. We're fortunate we have a pipeline right now. And so if you think about our grassroots racing, there are different opportunities for women to get into the sport. Right now, we don't have anyone at our top series. The last one we had was Danica Patrick. We have a couple that are in that race in our truck series, which is one of our 3 national series, and the middle series is called Xfinity. I think within 3 years, we will have a woman competing at the highest level in NASCAR. And if she gets there, she's going to be successful, because the journey to get there is hard. And then getting the right opportunities to get in the right equipment. This next gen car is going to be helpful for us because it kind of levels the playing field from the front of the field to the back of the field. And as it relates to the, you know, on the business side of NASCAR, you know, my officer group is made up of probably 40% women. It is a very important thing for me that we have a diverse, both a strong, diverse pool of employees from top to bottom, including our officer level, and to make sure that we have a significant number of women on that management team. So my CFO is female. The woman who ran all of my content, all of my marketing, all of my communications, Jill Gregory, she was the CMO. She left, unfortunately, in January to go back to the West Coast to be the president of Sonoma Raceway. So she's still in the sport. We have done a much better job than what we did to make sure that the Old Boys Network does not exist, because it's not okay. I was in a meeting a couple years ago, and there were just far too many people that look like me. So hired a head of human resources a couple of weeks ago, was African-American, the head of communications. Hired him about 4 months ago. He's African-American. Hired someone to head up our diversity, equity, inclusion efforts, who's African-American. We are on a journey to make sure that we are doing our job, because if we can't do it at NASCAR as kind of the center of the NASCAR universe, we can't expect the race teams and racetracks to do the same thing. It's not realistic yet. So we've had started a diversity council internally. We have 4 employee resources group, 1 for African Americans, 1 for Latinx, 1 for LGBTQ, and 1 for women. We have an industry diversity council, all things designed to drive efforts to make our sport more diverse, including, and I actually don't like to put women in that group. They stand separate. They're not part of a diverse group, nor are they a minority. We just have to do better, and a full stop. And everyone on my leadership team knows that this is what we're going to do. There is every single hire we have, if we do not hire someone who's a woman or is diverse, it's not that we're not hiring white males, we are. But every effort needs to be taken in order to make sure that we are diversifying our workforce, and it's working, and we are. And that part's very gratifying to me.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Steve. And really, really glad to hear that things are moving forward for you in a way that you want to. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us. Let's give a either virtual or actual round of applause here for Steve for coming on and giving us, there you go. You get all the virtual round of applauses going off there. God, I love Zoom. Thank you again so much for joining us. That was great. That was really insightful on not only NASCAR, but sports industry itself. So thank you again for joining us.
You're welcome. And thanks for having me on. I really enjoyed it.
Of course.
Good.
The rest of your trip's coming up.
Thank you. Yeah. All right. Take care now.
Yeah. See you later.
See ya. Bye.